Hey there, welcome to episode 138 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at 12:37 p.m. Pacific Time here in Greater Vegas on Tuesday, October 7th, 2025. We do publish on Tuesdays, so just in time. Today's title and topic, Assistive and Accessible. We could all use more of both, perhaps. If you're not familiar with the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, or take your pick, this audio program, Let's Innovate for Vegas, very quick rundown. The Innovate for Vegas Foundation was founded in 2022, in June, in fact, June of 2022, as a reboot of the Code for Vegas organization that was part of Code for America almost 10 years prior. In rebooting our organization, we wanted to be more inclusive of people who are not coders. So everyone can innovate. Doesn't matter whether you code or not. Maybe you're not even interested in coding. Innovation can take many forms. Our purpose statement in our founding to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. We're purposely vague on what it is we are ideating, innovating, and implementing. It could be anything. Making our smart city smarter comes to mind. But elevating community civic volunteerism in the pursuit of community elevation is our day-to-day. The Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program is designed, or was conceived, perhaps, that's a better way of putting it, to get the word out, to have discussions, conversations, to describe what it is we're trying to accomplish, how things are moving along, what we're aiming for down the road, etc. So there you go. That's the quick rundown. We have had guests in the past, and we might have guests in the future. It's all good. We can also talk about hackathons or innovation sprints or other engagements. We can really talk about the challengers, the people in the Greater Vegas area who are accomplishing interesting things and who often don't get attention for it. We'd love to talk to people like that, and so on and so on. The days are long, getting longer. On that note, hopefully wherever you found this audio program, and hopefully there are more places, and hopefully yet more in the future, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, which themselves contain a brief summary of today's episode and 2 links. I've kept it light today that we can, as we dive more into these topics, there will be relevant links and articles and so on. Today we'll just kind of introduce officially, for a change, assistive and accessible efforts that we would like to include in our roadmap moving forward. So let's get started so we can get finished on this lovely Tuesday just afternoon. The summary of today's episode, we have not covered these in a while, and not really from the perspective of initiatives into the future. Let us change that today. That is accessibility and assistive, often assistive technologies, but assistive anything, assistive and accessible anything. We'll make it a big giant umbrella for the purposes of discussion in general. The links for today's episode, the usual 2, Innovate for Vegas activity, our long been around homepage, innovateforvegas.org. That's innovate for, F-O-R, Vegas.org. All one word, no spaces. This is where you'll find information about our various initiatives, ideally about participation and progress and so on. It is a fine landing page for anyone curious about what it is we're trying to accomplish and the activities we are taking part in to get there. A new addition to our web portfolio, our Innovate for Vegas Foundation site, that is merely Innovate for Vegas, same spelling, F-O-R, no spaces, innovateforvegas.foundation. This is the business side. We are a Nevada nonprofit corporation and a 501c3 public charity. Since our founding in June of 2022, we're into our 4th fiscal year. And so you can find out more information about that sort of thing. The innovateforvegas.foundation website is still kind of new. It kind of looks exactly like the innovateforvegas.org layout, which is fine, but we need to add in some things like our bylaws and our official code of conduct, which we have linked for all of our projects, our initiatives, and so on our activity site, but making those generally available and transparent, part of the plan. So making the business side more visible, it's sort of the other side of the same coin. Not everybody's curious about bylaws and our annual 990 filings and so on. So we keep the business side in the front and the activity side in the back, or vice versa, if you like. So those are our two sites. Again, we'll have more links and articles and so on as we dive into these into the future. But for the moment, let's talk about these from the so-called 50,000 foot level. So some background. I've definitely talked about our ethos, the inclusivity, diversity, and accessibility that adorn our logo, our hexagonal seal style logo, as they pertain to our organization, how they differ from what some might think of when these terms are mentioned. A focus on civic volunteer skills, interest, experience, and so on, since we are not in any position to consider the usual DEI style of those terms. For example, we don't hire and we don't pay. We're a 100% volunteer from top to bottom. And note that that we are leaning toward accessibility of our infrastructure to participants and to everyone in this context. So when we talk about inclusivity, diversity, and accessibility, we're talking about it from our starting point and the way we pursue our initiatives and the way we perform our tasks and so on. Like, we have those as goals. For example, our website can always be more accessible, and it should be within the confines of what GitHub has when it comes to visiting our GitHub organization and so on and so on. So there's always some small obstacles, but essentially our efforts to be accessible in the way that we are pursuing our goals, and to also consider those things for our Greater Vegas communities around us and beyond. So note that we are leaning towards accessibility, not only of our infrastructure, but then as it extends into the world in general, as we need to consider accessibility and inclusivity and diversity in our initiatives externally, as the population at large might encounter and interact with our efforts. After all, they are our customers, our users, our target audience, if you like. It's also good to have people that are working on what we are trying to accomplish consider these things, because those can also be considered in other endeavors, maybe in the day job. It's kind of a job skill to consider these things, one that often doesn't get the attention it should. I myself have been involved in an effort to work with developers of assistive and accessible technologies in pre-pandemic times, and we have been working here and there to bring that effort back to the front burner, if you like. And in the case of the Greater Vegas area, taking advantage of the population of visitors we enjoy from all cultures and needs, special or otherwise, so that some of our visitors may be interested in being a part of a co-creation process of accessibility or assistive technologies or services, for example. Assistive technologies is often the term. They're often used together, but it doesn't have to be traditionally technology oriented. So I'll use that term now and then, but I prefer to think of assistive and accessible as the sort of the top level of focus. So it could be a technology, it could be a service or a method, a best practice. It could be a lot of things. So technology is one of them. I will probably lump together these two ideas, accessible and assistive technologies and developments and whatnot, even though they're not really the same thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in a simplified comparison, accessibility is more passive, as in ramps and audible signals and visible alerts and touch interfaces for visual cues and so on, while assistive is proactive and sometimes much more personal, interacting to make communication easier, movement easier, to enhance personal safety and comfort at home and elsewhere, to help with core human activities, and so on and so on. Not the same thing at all, really, but accessibility and assistivity, if that's a word, it is now, are arguably complementary, so I make them adjacent topics, and I speak about them almost interchangeably. An accessible website is something that people design, and then it does its thing every day. Assistive technologies, for example, are interacting with someone proactively It could be, I remember back when I was very young seeing the first form of what we could call a robot arm, a mechanical arm that could help with feeding with people who didn't have complete access to their motor functions. So helping with day-to-day life, improving life, making life more comfortable, and so on. These are more active pursuits. Assistive technologies assisting people who might need it. So a little bit more of a dive into these. So historically, accessibility is about physical access, whether the ability to enter a building via a ramp or to move within the building with ramps and elevators, wide doorways and hallways, navigable hallways and flooring. So wide hallways is a start, but navigable. Here's a fun fact. When I worked at Netscape Corporation a long time ago, whoever they were, reorganized the floor plan of the engineering building I was in, and on the ground floor they had permanent support structures to hold up the ceiling, the second floor, and they had these huge decorative sort of kind of half ellipse shaped things on these support columns. So they were decorative, but they were still they were still blocking, so you couldn't really get around them. So when they reorganized the floor plan, they moved all of the cubicles. Cubicles are always to be avoided. They moved all of the classic Herman Miller cubicles such that they were very near these support columns in a few cases, so that this decorative addition to the support column, and I mean, it wasn't something you could just it wasn't made of paper. It was a substantial device that would have to be removed, and I think they ended up having to do that. So they placed the cubicles so that you had to walk or move between the column and the wall, because the cubicles were now blocking the other way around the column. Well, unfortunately, it was nowhere near the width that you would expect in a normal hallway, certainly if you were using any sort of wheelchair or similar. And as it happens, our team had at least one person who made use of an electric wheelchair to move around. Any problems with that? Well, as long as you don't need to get to that half of the building, and hopefully we don't have any fires to be concerned with. So yeah, kind of a huge problem. So yeah, hallways and flooring should be navigable. You should be able to get around within the building, not only the width. The width you can pretty much have to design in from the start, but making sure that you arrange the inside of the building so people can get around, especially in case of emergency and so on. Make the flooring so that you can roll on it, Deep pile carpeting, maybe not the best idea. And that's just for moving around. There's also considerations regarding visual and audible cues and alternatives for both of those. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. Public transit vehicles with ramps and seating accommodations, access ramps at sidewalk corners for moving through crosswalks, audible pedestrian signals, and the list goes on. The Americans with Disabilities Act spells out a lot of requirements around accessibility, and most of the time this is how it is. The question, how often are the standards and expectations set out there not met, or perhaps met to the letter? Not quite malicious compliance, but you meet the requirements of the ADA, but not in an actual useful sense. Case in point, my favorite street corner, one which I pass through every day, give or take, but pretty much every day, and which is still close enough to where I am now that I could walk over there and snap another picture, for about 12 years. So no fast action to address this. Is a street corner with an ADA compliant ramp. So a street corner that goes down into the crosswalks. And I should point out this corner is very near a freeway interchange, not a freeway interchange, but access to the freeway so that there are on-ramps, off-ramps. It's a high volume of traffic area and so on. So cars are moving quickly. There's a lot of them sometimes, etc. So there's an ADA compliant ramp. There's an ADA compliant crosswalk button with an audible signal. But unfortunately, between these two things is landscaping, bricks, and something like a lava rock, a very, very rough landscaping configuration that I would say is not the best thing to walk on if you are completely ambulatory. So if I'm using a wheelchair, a walker, crutches, if I'm generally not 100% stable and ambulatory, so using these assistive physical devices, how am I going to get to that crosswalk button? Certainly if I'm in a wheelchair, there's no way I'm going to reach that button. So even though the street corner is ADA compliant and the button to press to cross to request a cross signal, crossing, the walk sign, so to speak, they're not configured in a way that actually works. And these are the sorts of things that we should at least shine a light on, so to speak. So just because you say that you've checked the accessible boxes doesn't mean you have. In the modern age, we all have our mobile electronic devices. Ideally, we are able to arrive at a device configuration that works for us, whatever our needs are. And then we use those devices to access information online, or that's probably the way, or locally on the device. But either way, we're often connecting to and retrieving information from the internet. This usually means to most people a website that has alt tags on images, but there are actual requirements as part of the ADA and with the WCAG, which is the latest incarnation of ARIA, basically, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines from the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. This is an evolving set of tools and methods to make a usable web for everyone. And if you're a city government or a state government or federal government, I believe you're required to comply with ADA accessibility standards and requirements for websites, or they should be. Think also about email messages that are only an embedded image without alternative text. I get those frequently. And I have images turned off in my email client, so I get to see, so to speak, the messages and how very little information is contained that can be easily parsed. Artificial intelligence is making this a little bit better. We can do better, though, as people. The real intelligence, right? If there is some. And even this podcast you're listening to now, this audio program, until recently did not have text transcript features. We now publish, and we published our entire catalog of episodes to YouTube. And to their credit, YouTube automatically generates a transcript from the audio contained within all videos, as far as I know. But certainly all of our episodes either do or should have. If they don't, we'll try to see why that's not. But the transcripts are available for our podcast episodes to make them more accessible. And these are generated automatically and within our budget. So kudos to Google and YouTube for doing that just in general. For the world, including more people, granted for ads perhaps, but enabling those with audio impairments to participate. Whether physical or virtual, the world is for everybody, and making the true is a substantial undertaking. The first step, and one that our organization could play a role in, is establishing a point of contact for those who encounter accessibility scenarios that may come up short. My street corner as an example, so that there is a place to begin making that right. As simple, I forgot that S there, as simple as a bug database of sorts, but something that would be useful for all accessibility scenarios. Do note that Clark County and the city of Las Vegas, as examples, subscribe to a third-party service called C-Click Fix. So SEAC, C-Click Fix. Right away. What if I can't see it? Which is aimed more at public works and code enforcement issues, not sufficient for this application, but they did start down that road of enabling members of the general public to mark problems. As an example, I was just flipping through it before I began recording today's episode. There was one issue that someone suggested. It was a graffiti on a traffic signal pole. So you could see the walk signal buttons, and some stickers were placed on there. So the issue was marked as closed, and the resolution was deferred. So they closed the ticket. The problem is solved. The resolution, sometime not today, right? So sometime in the future, perhaps. Okay, great. So that if this were an accessibility problem, that would merely say, yep, we see that street corner has that landscaping there. We're going to go ahead and leave it there for 10 more years, but we'll close your issue. So that workflow doesn't really work. It doesn't really solve any problems. It doesn't really change anything. We can do better. Speaking of assistive, which we are now, actual development of assistive services, devices, and applications, so assistive tech, but also other things, is a substantial undertaking. This is not an area, this is an area certainly worthy of consideration. If I can make sure it's worthy and not worthy of consideration. Perhaps the subject of a hackathon or similar, maybe hackathons, in the context of the Las Vegas hospitality platform that we have, this whole enabling visitors and then the population of visitors to the greater Vegas area. That's a lot of people to work with. Some of them might enjoy being able to express opinions or try out the latest thing. Generally speaking, though, our participation as our nonprofit foundation in an assistive focus would be about enabling and connecting to get started. Down the road, if we have more resources and more connection with these with other third parties and our local governments and so on, and the companies that drive our hospitality and tourism industries, that's another discussion in a future episode. If we look at a platform that captures specific instances of difficulties with accessibility as a first step, where we can play a role here is in connecting individual visitors, and yes, people who live here in the greater Vegas area as well, with providers of assistive services, devices, and applications. Sometimes these are assistive technologies, as I've said, but maybe there is more to it than just technologies. So anything, essentially, for the purposes of co-creation. That is either identification of issues, good or bad, in the way something has been deployed for use, or to work with developers of those things during design and development, either of a new thing or of an existing thing that may be going through an evolutionary redevelopment or redesign, etc. Sort of beta testing in a co-creation scenario and capturing feedback and other communication flow to enable productive discussion and evolution of the services, devices, and applications that could benefit from exposure and use by so many from various places. Sometimes there's a cultural component, certainly a language or ease of use. How are things described to the potential user of a thing? Is it clear and obvious? These are things that you can actually ask people about, and you will know. I always tell people about that street corner I described. If you just had one person who needs this street corner, they might have said, hey, I can't reach that button. And this could have happened at any time during the last 10 years, and you would think it would have, but so it is. And by the way, I will say very near that intersection, there were times when, for some reason, they have very large street construction sign. There's always road construction in Vegas. A very large sort of an X frame, an X-shaped footprint that lays on the street, and then a vertical component with springs on it that you can mount a traffic control sign like construction ahead, etc. So that the wind will blow the sign and it will move back into position thanks to the springs, and the X provides a nice wide footprint. This is not great for storing in a bike lane, for example, which so often happens. So as a rider of bicycle myself, I know that would be problematic. That's why headlights are good in the evenings. So what I have seen is signs like that moved up onto the sidewalk. Some sidewalks here in the area are not necessarily fully improved. So this is really more of an asphalt improvement of sorts, sort of a temporary sidewalk with grass and a slight hill that goes off. So on one side you have the street, on the other side you have difficult terrain to navigate if you happen to be in a wheelchair. So if somebody moves a sign like this onto the sidewalk, you have now provided a almost unmovable obstruction to someone who might need to get by. Then what? I've seen this happen on where you wouldn't even know that the sign was there until you've rolled or walked for a block or two around a bend, and there are no accessible ramps. There's no way to get around the object. So basically you got to go back or risk it, right? Or ask for someone to help move it if needed. So yeah, these are things that a smart city can address, I think. Yeah. If we look at a platform that captures specific instances of difficulties with accessibility as a first step, where we can play a role here is in connecting individual visitors and yes, people in the Greater Vegas area with these problems. So to restate that, there should be a place where you say, hey, this sign is here. Now, this is something that should be addressed. But what if we said, okay, and unlike See Click Fix, for example, there is a sign on this sidewalk. Now, anyone who might be navigating that area on foot, on wheels, this includes bicyclists, really, when you think about it, should be able to see that information in real time, almost like a traffic update on Waze or Google Maps, right? And this applies to people who live here, but also applies to people visiting the Strip or if they're in an unfamiliar area because they're just a visitor. So I think there's a ton of potential here to make life better for people. I know that's crazy. Greater Vegas as a co-creation hub in this space. I think that would be an interesting area to focus some of our attention. This would be an embrace of the role Greater Vegas plays as a destination city. Now, some people will say a global innovation hub. We can get there too. And destination city is really destination region. As you may know, the Las Vegas Strip is not actually in Las Vegas. It's in unincorporated Clark County. So let's be more correct sometimes, but okay, destination city, the city of Las Vegas. That's where I am now. And if you are on the Strip, it is where you are not. To connect so many of our visitors with the assistive services, devices, and applications they might find here in resorts, places of business, on the streets and sidewalks, at the airport, and so on, with ongoing processes to improve all of these. Co-creation, including the users of things in their design and improvement, is a good idea most of the time. It's used very frequently in general product design, etc. Certainly a great idea when it comes to both assistive and assistive and accessible anything. Merely having assistive and accessible as checkboxes is not sufficient. We can make these better. And you can look again at that street corner I described. The boxes are checked, and yet they don't work together. It's more of a systems approach and a practical examination by someone who actually needs these things. So you end up with checking the boxes because we must have an accessible street corner with an ADA compliant ramp, et cetera, et cetera. But no one says, okay, you check the boxes, but does it work? And in that case, not always, for 12 years. So next steps, what do we do next? One of the featured focus areas for CES 2026 coming up in 3 months from now? No, 4? 3 months from right now is here in the Greater Vegas area, of course, CES every year. They're calling Age Tech Plus Accessibility, aimed more at what is sometimes referred to as aging in place or now living in place, with the assumption being that you or me, we will age wherever we are living in our upper age ranges. Wherever we are living, we may be ambulatory today. We may have complete total control and use of our functions and so on. But over time, as we age or as we continue living in the place we are in, we may need to make use of additional accommodations, assistive technologies, or have accessibility issues in general. That's what we call getting older. I'm doing that right now. I have had an email conversation with the individual with CTA, that's the Consumer Technology Association, that they own the CES events. He's driving this feature for CES upcoming. It would be interesting to continue this and other conversations in this space, of course. Again, access and assistance, making up that bigger picture, but this is a start if it is Age Tech Plus accessibility, if they don't include assistive. Age Tech probably does, though, really, when you think about it. And I may not even be doing this focus justice at this early stage, so I don't really know a ton about their agenda and who will be meeting and whatnot, hence that conversation. And conversation is good. Shining a light, so to speak, also good. So hopefully I will continue to speak or email and speak between now and CES 2026 and see what sorts of discussions can be had. We, our organization, can, of course, begin this effort by connecting people with accessibility concerns in public spaces, like that street corner I mentioned, and in useful ways in private spaces, that is, spaces not in the public purview operated by our local government. So think a resort owned by a corporation, or a small business or generally private property or property not in the purview of public works, code enforcement, etc. We can do both. We can do it all. This would be providing a starting point with a broad and transparent view of how Greater Vegas continues to evolve as an accessible smart city. So transparency is the beginning, making that. And by the way, I did check using Wave is a browser extension that provides a sort of an audit for WCAG or YARIA, if you're still a couple of revisions back, compliance with those guidelines and so on, to show whether a website is actually trying to be accessible. The SeeClickFix site is not bad. It comes close. We can do better. We can always do better. We should always strive to do better. So making use of these tools and providing this access and capturing and presenting data in transparent ways will hopefully provide encouragement to make that 12-year street corner I've already described a thing that gets addressed. Hey, look at that. They fixed it after 12 years. That would be nice. From there, from having a base platform, it is about proactively engaging people in new ways, which is certainly well within our purview to make our communities better, which of course includes our local and visitor communities, maybe one big community. Nah, let's keep them separate. And helping to enable full participation this and around our someday smarter city. So hopefully the people visiting and the people who live here, those communities, and by the way, we do try to focus on, beyond Vegas. And with so many people visiting here from so many places, it's always interesting to see what people encounter where they are from. So some of the things we are developing when we innovate for Vegas don't necessarily need to stay in Vegas. If we were going to do our marketing tagline, it would be what happens in Vegas is available for you to take with you. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Production by Street. Anyway, we'll leave it there. This is hopefully a topic that we'll get more into. Our first hackathon, when we first launched back in, it was actually before June, when we were pondering the reboot of this organization. Our first hackathon, I think it was in February of 2022, maybe March, was our Open Transit initiative, the Open Transit Hackathon. Very little participation, but that was the spark, so to speak. The second month, because we wanted to try to have a hackathon every month to introduce new topics and new focus ideas and to kick off new initiatives for ongoing development. This was confusing for people. Wait, we have to launch a new thing? No. We're doing a hackathon to try out ideas, to become familiar with it. And that's where we start some development processes that could go on forever. We're a nonprofit organization. We don't have to ship a product, but we can think about these things. Anyway, our second month was accessibility, or it was going to be. And a youngin', a person who didn't have quite the worldview that some of us have, said, that seems kind of boring, only because you don't need this stuff yet. So our vision is into the future, and our desire is to make this smart city smarter, of course, and to make it more accessible and to provide a platform, if you like, where we might co-create assistive services, devices, applications, technologies, or other. I guess anything is a technology if you try hard enough. So we'll try to make this a place where people can try things, and they can work with startups and small companies and big giant corporations to improve products, because co-creation can answer that question that someone sitting in one of those cubicles blocking passage by people in wheelchairs, perhaps. No, that was a horrible story. When it happened, we were like, what is going on here? Did anybody think about this? Sitting in a cubicle, you don't always know what your users are going to need. Why would someone need to walk by this area on the other side of this decorative panel on this support column? Oh, so once you see and you know, and so on. So yeah, there's a lot of possibility here. And again, it has been something on our agenda to some degree since our inception. So hopefully we can actually start to get this ball rolling. This is a destination city of sorts. So many people visit the greater Vegas area. Some of them might benefit from some of them probably benefit in some way from assistive technologies and from general accessibility considerations. We could benefit everyone, including the people who make this stuff, by listening to them, providing that forum for discussion or platform for sharing information and experiences to make those things better. And as I like to say, we should be making things better for people who need them, which makes them better for people who want them instead of the other way around. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. Thank you for listening, as always, and we'll catch you later.